Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Paul Grosswald.
And where do you reside, Paul?
Kings Park, New York.
Okay, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay. Are you currently employed?
I work as a mobile DJ for the Pros Entertainment Company in New York.
Could you just describe what a mobile DJ is?
I go to parties such as weddings or bar mitzvahs, and I play music for people to dance to. I work as an MC. I also go to bars and run karaoke nights, you know, things like that.
Okay. Do you know Tom Padgett?
Yes, I do.
Okay. When did you meet Mr. Padgett?
I spoke to him on the phone over the course of the past few weeks a few times. I met him in person yesterday.
Do you know Laura Padgett?
I've seen her. I never met her.
Okay. Do you know their children, Bo or Julie?
No, I do not.
Are you familiar with a organization called the Church of Scientology?
Yes, I am.
How are you familiar with the church?
I was a member of the church, and it was a pretty traumatic experience for me. And since my membership since I've been involved in the group, I've been speaking out against it publicly.
When did you become involved?
In September of 1989.
How did you become involved with the church?
Well, I was in New York City, and there was a fella on the street handed me a Dianetics personality test, which actually made no reference to the Church of Scientology, so I did not know it was the Church of Scientology that was sponsoring this test. I filled out the personality test, and what it consisted of was a 200-question questionnaire, and I filled out the questions, and then I mailed it in, and then a few days later, I got a phone call back from a fellow from Dianetics who told me he had the results of my personality test and he wanted me to go in to discuss the results of it. Never mentioned it was the Church of Scientology, just mentioned it was the...
This is obviously hearsay, and I'm not sure that I can ever piece it together with relevance. I'm going to have to object on the basis of relevancy as well, but what he is saying is obvious hearsay. Really, I guess I'd like to know what the purpose of this witness is before we go further.
Clearly, the issue has is before the court on the best interest of the children as it involves Scientology. Clearly, the best person to describe the church would be a member or former member of the church.
He's trying to... Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Mr. Grossman can testify to his experiences and observations when he was a member of the Church of Scientology.
Your
and
Honor,
that is the purpose of his testimony.
I do not believe that it's any more admissible than somebody testifying to their experiences in a car wreck that they had at age 16 when you are litigating a case that involves a car wreck to people who are in their 30s who are totally unrelated to the person who had the car wreck at age 16. This is a person who apparently, as he says, speaks out against the Church of Scientology based upon some encounter that he had personally. There is no possible way that that has any relevance to this case.
When he will testify that when he became involved with...
I don't want... You know, the purpose of his testimony is one thing. What he will say is another. I'm interested in what the purpose is because it's improper for Mr. Dove to state what he's actually going to testify to.
Will show harm to the children.
He has never met these children.
Potential harm to the children, Your Honor.
He is not in this community. He's nothing more than a disc jockey who may have or may not have been a member of the Church of Scientology at some point.
I'm going to sustain your objection on the hearsay portion. For purposes of, and I'm going to allow him to continue to testify, but Mr. Dove, keep it on point, okay?
Sure. When did you become a member of the Church of Scientology?
Well, there's never a point when you become a member. What happens is I filled out this personality test.
Objection, Your Honor. That's unresponsive to the question about his personality test.
Sustain.
When were you first contacted by the Church of Scientology?
Well, that was it. It was in regards to this personality test.
And what did the personality test consist of?
It consisted of, I fill out these 200 questions. They then use the answers to the questions to give me an analysis of my personality.
What was the analysis of your personality?
They told me that I had some flaws.
Objection, Your Honor. There's no way to cross-examine.
Sustained.
What's your understanding of the analysis of your personality?
That I had some problems that I needed to improve, and that Dianetics was going to offer me a technique that I could use to improve those flaws in my personality.
Did you accept the techniques of Dianetics?
I agreed to pay money for a course where I was going to learn more about it.
How much
Objection,
money did you
Your
pay?
Honor, again, is being unresponsive. He's trying to interject testimony, the payment, courses, all of that. If you would instruct this witness to answer only the questions that are asked of him. He wants to testify. You know, I think I can anticipate just from the basis of his first few answers that he just wants to be able to ask him anything to just run off in all directions, and that is what he's attempting to do. And I'm going to have to, I guess, keep on objecting if that's the case. If he keeps being unresponsive to the specific questions that are asked of him.
I'm going to sustain your objection. Have you been a witness before?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Try very hard to be responsive to the questions you're asked, and that's it. And that way perhaps we won't have as many interruptions.
Okay. Sometimes some of the answers require some explanation in order for me to answer his question, so I'm sorry. Okay.
He can follow up.
Let him follow up, okay.
On anything that you say, as Mr. Halliburton will have the opportunity to ask you any.
Okay.
What were the results of your personality test?
That I had some problems with my personality. That
What problems specifically?
I was unmotivated in school, I had trouble with relationships, I had low self-esteem, I was insecure about certain things.
After receiving your personality assessment, what did you do? I agreed to take a course called a Hubbard Dianetic Seminar. What was that course?
Well, they said it was a course that would help me improve these problems that I had with my personality.
Did it cost you any money to take this course?
I paid $95 for it.
What did the course consist of?
It consisted of a technique called auditing.
What was auditing?
Auditing is a technique in which in order to explain auditing, I have to explain some of Hubbard's philosophy. Is that okay?
Objection, Your Honor.
I can't explain it without.
I've asked him
I
what
can't
is
help if he
auditing.
doesn't know.
He has a right to explain his answer.
You know, the relevance of what courses he took. So what?
I'm going to allow him to testify.
No, just if I could, just for the record, again, Your Honor, that it be an ongoing objection for the very bases of his testimony, and certainly its content. But then I'll be specific of whether he's responsive to questions and so forth. If I may have that
We will
preservation.
note that you have an ongoing objection to the relevancy of this of the testimony of this witness. Is that
Thank
correct?
you. Yes.
What does auditing consist of?
Okay, very briefly, Hubbard's philosophy is that
Objection. He is.
auditing consists of trying to remove engrams from the reactive mind.
What are engrams?
Engrams are
Engrams, excuse me.
negative memories, painful memories, which L. Ron Hubbard says are caused by negative experiences that happen in your life.
Who is L. Ron Hubbard?
He is the founder of the Dianetics and Scientology organization and the author of the book Dianetics.
During the course of your study in your course, did you learn about L. Ron Hubbard?
I learned only positive things about L. Ron Hubbard, which I later learned were untruthful. But
Now, engrams, were you able to remove engrams from your existence?
I thought that's what I was doing.
What technique was used to remove these engrams?
The therapist, who calls himself an auditor, asks you, as the person being audited, to recall some negative incident in your life. And then I would think of some bad thing that's happened to me, and I would talk about it, and I would keep talking about it over and over and over again. And when I'm done talking about it, the auditor would ask me to go back and talk about it again. And so there's a repetition involved.
How long would these sessions last?
It could vary anywhere from a half hour to 5 hours or 6 hours. It can go on indefinitely.
Were you aware of other people who were going through the same process?
Yes.
How were you aware of that?
Well, basically all the other people, they use a system called co-auditing. So the person who's auditing me, I would then turn around and audit them. And there were other people taking the course at the same time who were doing the same technique on each other.
Where was the center that you were taking these courses?
On 46th Street in Manhattan.
How many people were at this center, if you know?
Well, you have people taking courses. Probably, in my classroom, there averaged around 15 to 20 people taking courses at the same time I was there. And then there's a staff of perhaps 80 to 100 people.
Were any children? Were there any children involved?
Not at this point. When I was in New York, I didn't notice any.
Was there ever a point where you did notice children?
Later on in my experience, I switched over to the Long Island organization in Hempstead, and there were some small children there. And also later on, when I joined the C organization, which is another place in Manhattan, I saw small children there too.
When you talk about small children, what ages are you referring to?
The kids who lived in Hempstead, they didn't live in Hempstead, but their father worked in Hempstead. They were probably around 10 or 8 or so. And the kids in the C organization were preschool age, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5.
Were you aware whether these children went through the auditing process also?
I'm not sure about the 3, 4, 5-year-olds in the C organization. I know for a fact that the other kids, the 8, 10-year-old kids, were going through auditing. In fact, they were called cadets. They were Scientology cadets.
At the time that you became involved with the Church of Scientology, how old were you?
I was 18.
And where were you? Were you enrolled in the university?
Hofstra University on Long Island.
After your involvement you became involved with the Church of Scientology, did you remain at Hofstra?
No, I dropped out of school after being involved for 6 months.
Why did you drop out of school?
They convinced me that school was not going to give me the benefits that Scientology would give me. So they convinced me to drop out of school so I can work full-time for the Church of Scientology. And they persuaded me to drop out of school and sign a 1 billion year employment contract to work for the Church of Scientology, and in which case I had to move out of my dorm room at Hofstra, and I moved into the C organization building in Manhattan.
Why a 1 billion year contract?
Because by this point they had instilled me with the belief that Scientology could give me the power to live forever. And so in exchange for this ability to live forever, I was going to commit 1 billion years to them, because in the overall scheme of things, 1 billion years isn't really that long when you think about it.
Did you believe you were going to live again or live for 1 billion years?
At that time I did. And even after I signed the contract, I still had second thoughts about it, and I've still started regretting it shortly after I signed the contract.
Did your involvement in Scientology include the language of Scientology?
They have their own dictionaries. They have a lot of language that you have to learn.
Did you use that on a daily basis when you were at the organization?
Yes, people talk in Scientology's language.
If someone is online, what does that mean?
That means that it's basically a positive compliment. If they're online, it means that a line is a line of communication, basically. If you're online, it means you're communicating well. For instance, if I'm online with Scientology, that means I'm learning my Scientology well, and I'm relating with the organization very well. Basically, I'm a true believer. If I'm online with my parents, that means my parents and I have a good relationship. We communicate with each other.
What is a PTS?
That stands for potential trouble source.
What does that mean?
That is a person who is connected to a suppressive person.
What is a suppressive person?
A suppressive person is a person who is opposed to the Church of Scientology and its beliefs.
What is the teachings of Scientology when a member is involved with a suppressive person?
Objection, Your Honor. That goes against the order. He's going into the beliefs of Scientology, which are prohibited by Judge Butler's order of March 17.
It goes to her beliefs, not to his beliefs.
You asked about the Church of Scientology, the beliefs.
It goes to her belief in the Church of Scientology, which we did not touch. He certainly can address what his understanding was of the beliefs of disconnection. The reason why they don't want us to bring up disconnection is because their intent is to disconnect this man from his children.
Oh, that's an impossibility according to Dr. Nichols' own testimony.
But not an impossibility.
Are you arguing your case, or are you stating a
Overruled it
response?
there.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Yes. What is an SP?
A suppressive person, somebody who's opposed to the Church of Scientology.
Is it the teachings of the Church of Scientology that a member disconnect from an SP?
If you are PTS, potential trouble source, that means you're connected to a suppressive person and you must disconnect from the suppressive person in order to continue in Scientology.
Is a non-believer in Scientology a suppressive person?
Well, yes and no. See, it depends if you're actually attacking Scientology or not. For instance, if I didn't believe in Scientology but I kept my mouth shut, they probably wouldn't be concerned about me being a suppressive person. But when I go out and start speaking against them, I am certainly a suppressive person.
Have you ever had an opportunity to listen to any tapes prepared by the Church of Scientology?
Yes, they have quite a few tapes that they put out.
You ever had an opportunity to listen to a tape? See if you recognize this particular tape.
This is a tape called Can We Ever Be Friends? And I bought this tape for my parents. My parents were objecting to my involvement in Scientology because I had suggested to my parents that I was thinking of dropping out of school, and my parents were very upset about that. So they declared me a PTS, potential trouble source. And they said that this tape could handle my PTS condition. If I give this tape to my parents, I'll be able to calm them down and my PTS condition would go away.
Does this tape discuss the benefits of public education?
This tape basically explains to my parents that you can't blame me for wanting to drop out of school. It paints a picture of public education as being a harmful thing, and therefore you have no right to object to my wanting to abandon school.
Do you know where that part is on that tape?
I believe it's queued up. I mean, we can check and see. It should be queued up.
And you've had an opportunity to listen to this tape?
Yes, I have.
A casual tour of some modern schools or universities can make the observer wonder why any decent child or person would consent to stay in one today. Teachers and security guards beaten and killed. Students glaze-eyed with drugs draped across doorways and desks. It can be a desperate arena. And the subjects taught are often not subjects anymore, but confusions. Reading, writing, and arithmetic seem to have become perplexity, illiteracy, and mystification. In the war-mad days of 19th century Germany, the psychologists spawned the technology of degrading all men to animals. He is in charge of your schools today. It is compulsory training in every grade and teacher level to regard all students and friends as treacherous beasts and atheists. Where the older generation did not stem this rape of education, should they criticize members of the younger generations who draw aside from the beast to attack it in the flank and try to civilize the monster their betters supported and helped create? The schools the taxes pay for today are not the schools the older generation has such fond memories of. Bust and beaten and dismayed, going nowhere, learning nothing, at vast parental expense, One need not be very questioning as to why a student would bolt his school and go to people who can teach and who are making inroads with school reform. One can hide and pretend and say, without any inspection of evidence, that Scientology is not doing anything about it. The facts, statistics, and rooms full of documents prove that Scientology is doing something about it.
That's the end of that side of the tape.
Thank you. Did you yourself believe that public education, as described, was not appropriate for you after being enrolled in Scientology?
Yes.
Were you allowed to have contact with your parents as a member?
The contact became more and more controlled to the point where every time I called my parents, there would be a Scientologist sitting next to me, coaching me and listening to the conversation and coaching me on what to say.
Why would they do that, if you know?
Well, I believe they were afraid that if I spoke to my parents might convince me to leave Scientology. That if I was allowed to freely communicate with them, that's what would happen.
When did you eventually leave Scientology?
My parents arranged, when or how?
When?
When? In April of 1990.
How?
My parents arranged what is called an exit counseling, in which former members of the group, former Scientologists, who are also psychologists and cult experts, sat me down and spoke to me and showed me information about Scientology and tried to get me to think about things in a way that I wasn't allowed to think about them before. That process failed, and I left the exit counseling and went back to the church, and when I got back there, the cult leaders decided to kick me out and they sent me home.
Was it expected by the members of the Church of Scientology that you would contribute financially?
Yes, the courses and the books you have to buy are very expensive.
Is there a ladder that you go?
They call it the bridge to total freedom, and the idea is you pay money for courses, and with each course you go up a level until you reach the highest level.
And what's the highest level?
It's called OT8.
And what is OT8?
Well, the letters OT stand for Operating Thetan, which is part of the language of Scientology. A Thetan is a spirit. Basically, they believe that I am not a person, I am a spirit, I am a soul, and they use the word Thetan. Operating Thetan means a spirit who is in control of all their spiritual abilities. So they have 8 OT levels, and in the highest OT level, OT8, they tell you that you will gain truth revealed. In other words, you will learn the entire truth about the entire universe. See, as you go up the OT bridge, you gain certain abilities, such as ESP, the ability to leave your body at will, the ability to move objects with your mind. These are all the supernatural abilities that they tell you you're going to get. And you keep getting more and more of these abilities until OT8, when you will remember all your past lives and you will remember the beginning of time, and you will have a total understanding of the entire universe.
How many OT levels did you make?
I never made it to the OT levels because before the OT levels there are other levels which financially I didn't have the money to take those.
What level were you at when you finally resigned from the?
I actually they have what they call life improvement courses, which they use at the very bottom of the bridge, and those are the courses that I had taken at the time that I had left. I hadn't gotten past the life improvement courses.
Did you ever observe the use of hypnosis by the Church of Scientology?
Yes, I've observed what I believe to be hypnosis.
What did you observe?
Well, the auditing that I described previously is a form of hypnosis. It puts you in a very relaxing state of mind where you are vulnerable to suggestions. I've also observed communication drills which are designed to put people into a hypnotic trance. Basically, like they have a drill called TR0, which, and I'm looking over here because I noticed she was using it before when I was playing that tape. It's a drill in which you stare at a person, basically like this. And so I'm sitting there staring at you, and there'll be another person in the room staring back at me. So you're staring at each other. And the purpose of this is, it's called confronting, because they say you can't communicate with somebody unless you're comfortable confronting them first. So this exercise is designed to do that. And if I'm sitting there doing TR0 with you, and I shift in my seat like this, then they would say flunk, and I would have to start all over again. So the idea is to be able to stare at the person without moving or flinching. And what happens is it starts out, you do it maybe 5-10 minutes at a time, so it's kind of fun, it's no big deal. But by the end of my experience in Scientology, I was doing this exercise for 3 hours. So I would be sitting there like this for 3 hours. And if you do that, that's a form of hypnosis, because it's putting you into a trance-like state in which you're basically blocking out everything else. I noticed when I was doing these TRs, I'd be sitting in a room with somebody, and the room would be empty. And 3 hours later, I'd be done, and I would get up, and I would see a bunch of people in the room. And I would say to myself, I don't remember these people even coming in the room. I didn't even hear them walking in. Because you're so focused on this other person that you're staring at, you block everything out, and you don't even realize what's going on around you.
As a member of the church, do you have to go to the center on a regular basis?
They try to encourage you to go as much as possible. What happened to me was I started working there.
That's not responsive to the question.
Right. Just answer my question.
Oh, yes. The answer is yes.
What happened to you?
What happened to me was I was going there once or twice a week to take these courses, and when I didn't have the money to take any more courses, they invited me to come work for them. And then I started working there, and I was working there every day.
Are you familiar with a TRL policy?
I've heard of that, yes.
What is that?
It's similar to the training routine I explained before, the TR0, only it's called training.
Explain it on the basis of he's heard of it. It's not a foundation for him to explain what that is if he's heard of it.
Have you ever been involved or performed a TRL policy?
I never performed it while I was in the church, no.
Have you ever observed TRL policy?
Well, I've seen the policy written by L. Ron Hubbard, but I've never seen people practicing it.
And what is the policy as you have read?
It encourages people to it teaches people how to lie using TR0. In other words, the technique that I explained before, when you're staring at a person, now you have to do that same technique, only you have to elicit false statements, or they call it elicit false data, as you're doing this TR0 technique.
At this point in time, you're not a member, is that correct?
Right.
And how long have you been away from the organization?
For 4 years.
Just speaking from your involvement with the Church of Scientology, in your opinion, to the best interest of any child to become
Objection, Your
involved.
Honor. That's
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'd ask to have a ruling on that. We had Ms. Benoit, Ms. Terry, everyone testify what they felt was in the best interest of the Padgett children, and the
difference was, Mr. Dove, that all of those individuals had met the Padgett children, knew the Padgett children. This gentleman has testified he doesn't know them, so...
But I didn't ask about it.
Objection sustained.
Your Honor, I asked about any child. I did not ask specifically about the Padgett children.
Sustained.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
investments. Mr. Grosswald, are you telling this court that you dropped out of Hofstra University based on what you played before this court on the tape that we heard?
No, I am telling them that I dropped out based on the techniques that were used on me.
Are you telling this court that the tape that we heard tells people that they cannot attend the public schools?
It is used to encourage people to drop out of school.
You interpret it that way?
Yes, I do.
Do you think it might be interpreted differently, that indeed there is trouble in the public schools, and perhaps going to another school is in their best interest?
Well, I received other information besides that
I
tape.
ask you a question. I don't know what you've received and what you haven't. Will you answer my question, please, sir?
Repeat the question?
Are you saying that based on that tape, no, excuse me, can that tape also easily be interpreted as saying to somebody that there is a problem with the public school system, and therefore an individual may be better served by going to another school?
No, the tape bashes all schools. It doesn't specify that there are certain schools that are better.
Have you ever heard of Channel 19 on Cablevision here in Madisonville?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever heard of preachers, or ever heard preachers just generally blasting the public education systems of America?
I can't recall a specific instance, but I'm sure they do.
You think that, have you ever heard on TV, turn it on Sunday morning, I believe you're Jewish, is that correct?
Yes.
Turn it on TV, I expect even in New York, and seen what I call the TV ministers talking about various schools for people to send their children to for the Christian education primarily. Have you seen that?
I don't watch Christian preachers.
Have you read anything about people encouraging others to go to their church-affiliated schools rather than the public schools?
I suppose that
I don't think the Catholic Church is really the entity in the private sector of education in the world that most encourages their believers to drop out of the public schools and attend their sponsored schools.
Objection, Your Honor. Assuming facts not in evidence.
Overrule. You can answer.
I don't believe the Catholic Church uses the same techniques to convince people to leave public school and go to the Catholic school, and that makes a big difference.
You think the Catholic Church encourages people to leave the public school system?
Yes, but not using the same techniques that this tape is using.
Do you think the Catholic Church talks about the problems that are within the public school systems throughout the United States?
Your Honor, I'm going to have to object again, because unless he's going to bring a Catholic priest in here to establish these facts, this is just all pure speculation of the beliefs of Catholicism and what the church teaches.
I'm exploring this witness's knowledge.
I was very reluctant to overrule the objection on the relevance of this witness to begin with. I think that Mr. Halliburton has the right to delve into what this gentleman knows about. If you're holding him out to be an expert on cults, then I think he can ask those sorts of questions.
Well,
If that's what you're saying he is.
Well, I'll respect your ruling, Your Honor, but I mean, the thing is, what he's doing here is saying the Catholic Church, we are forbidden by court order to hit Miss Padgett's feelings on the church. He has not gone on his witness list, a Catholic priest, to come in here and say we encourage these children to do this. I mean, if you're allowing him to open the door on Catholicism, then I think we have the same right to open the door with Miss Padgett on her beliefs in Scientology. 3 questions in a row has dealt with Catholicism. It's not dealing with Baptists, it's not dealing with Methodists, it's not dealing with Christians, Zen Buddhists, or anything. It's dealing with Catholicism. Now, if that is a recognized church, as is the Church of Scientology, if we're going to open the door and have religious beliefs of certain religions, then I think that is just as well goes against Judge Boulder's order as does our getting into Miss Padgett's beliefs.
As I understand Judge Boulder's order, it prohibits you from delving into Miss Padgett's beliefs, religious beliefs, under the Constitution. However, that order does not address, nor does it prohibit you from proving, if you can, that a particular religious belief or practice adversely affects their children. And if that's what this witness is here testifying about as an expert, I'm going to allow Mr. Halliburton to question him on what he knows. So I'm going to overrule your objection.
Well, just for the record, I think that there has to be some foundation laid instead of just blanket assertions that is the philosophy of the Catholic religion, which is what is being presented.
I would request then that you might rephrase your questions or make them hypothetical or do something. But I'm going to let you know, I'm going to overrule.
I'm just testing his knowledge. I really, in fairness, I don't think he knows any more about the Roman Catholic Church than he does about the Church of Scientology. I think that's apparent, and that is exactly what I'm trying to show this court, is that really anyone who would interpret the tape that we just heard to say that that's saying drop out of all schools and stop your education is just ludicrous. But enough said. I'll go on something else. The point is, I believe the point has been made anyway. Have you ever had any psychological profile of yourself made?
No.
You're a disc jockey. Apparently you didn't continue at Hofstra University.
That is not correct. I did graduate just last December.
You have chosen, what did you get a major in?
Communication.
And why is...
And a minor in psychology.
And is that now into your working as a disc jockey at bars?
I'm looking for a job in the TV film industry, and this is what I've got to make money as a part-time job in the meantime.
So you haven't been successful in obtaining...
I've only been out of school 3 months.
I believe that's all. This witness.
No, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Can it be finally excused?
I think so.
Thank you very much.